In this video, I just wanted to talk through, I'm often asked about my background. There's probably questions about what is the technology that LockBox and ConnectX and the BankX ecosystem and platform is going to use. We're going to talk about a little bit of technology today. And in talking with one of the community members, like, Lance, you should really give the story behind the story of the journey that you've gone through to get to where we are now, and having, sort of the idea for BankX and the ecosystem and platform in this private network. And then I think also this video should help to handle any of the issues with the sort of the standard crypto response that everything is a scam. So to go through, I'm a former pilot. I studied at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Florida. Then I decided that, I didn't know if I wanted to spend that much time sitting in a seat, even though I do now. But the only exciting part for flight was taking off and landing. Everything else was pretty boring. So I switched to an economics degree at George Mason University. And then that's really, what I really enjoyed learning about, that and business. And then while I was in college, I had a vending machine company that pretty much put me through college. And what I learned from that experience is the idea of leverage of not only time plus money, because I would have the product in the vending machine that I would sell for 10 times more. And I didn't have to do anything but go around, say, once a month and collect quarters. So this, I had one machine that did $1,800 a month. So I don't know if you know how heavy quarters are, but $20.25 in quarters is 1 pound. So only someone that's operated in a bunch of quarters would know how much they weigh. So I was attracted to technology through a friend I went to high school with, because of the economics. People were coding software and they would sell it over and over again. And so that's when I got into technology sales for enterprise applications. Also, sort of along this process, I'm a multiple patent holder. So I've gone through the patent process quite a bit. And one of the patents has been prosecuted successfully. So who did that for us was an attorney named Frank Washko, and he'll end up being our general counsel for BankX and the family of companies. So as I mentioned, I sold 7-figure software enterprise applications to the CXO level. So I was a top salesperson at Computer Associates and MicroStrategy. I sold the first MicroStrategy 7 in North America to JD Power here in Southern California. So at the time, I bring that up because it was very strategic for MicroStrategy and sort of set them on a path with some of the technology. And Michael Saylor, who people have gotten to know now because of his entrance into cryptocurrency, announced me to the whole company and how strategic this was and that sort of thing. So I've used to work for Michael Saylor, back early in my career. And I always wanted to start my own company. So the first one I started was a mobile security company called iTag. And that won a CTIA technology award. So I think there's CES as the large consumer products show in Vegas, and CTIA, what I would say is sort of the second largest one. So that application had 50,000 users, and that was a process too. I had some friends that wanted to invest, and one friend in particular who was a large investor ended up, after I had signed on with the developers and put a deposit, decided he wanted to go do something else. So I ended up actually borrowing to start that company. So you sort of run into different things that happen as you're starting companies, and things don't always go as planned, and you sort of adjust and keep going forward. So part of that process within, after iTag, was I was a part of a technology accelerator during that era when everybody was doing technology accelerators and VC firms were tied to them, and it was a good way to get funding. So I did a technology accelerator twice called Founders Institute. So the person that runs that is Adeo Ressi, and he is sort of best friends and college roommates with Elon Musk. I believe it was a road trip. I don't know if it was a road trip, but it was Adeo Resi who suggested to Elon Musk that he should start to innovate in space and start SpaceX. I believe it was like 17 or 18 years ago that happened. So Founders Institute, when I did that here in Los Angeles, there was 3,500 applicants and they chose 45. During the 3-month process, it was incredibly intense. It was all you did for sort of 80 hours a week. Half of the people didn't make it through. So I ended up graduating at the top of the class of that in 2013. And then I was invited back in 2015 to their advanced sort of accelerator of the Founders Institute in San Francisco, which was a much shorter acceleration program for 2 weeks. And I graduated at the top of my class there in 2015 in San Francisco. So both of those were pretty intense, and I learned a lot. I've probably had a couple hundred mentors, and you can get whiplash of just one person says this and one, so at some point after you've taken in all the information, you sort of have to go with your gut and what you feel is the best way to go with how you're going to operate the company or with an idea you have. So the second company that I did was this concept of a mobile advertising company where I wanted to show ads for things that you were most likely to purchase in stores around you. I thought mobile advertising was going to be a huge area. So one of my mentors in that company was Alex Muse, who was the original founder of Shop Savvy. So he was advisor to the company, and sort of talking with him, what I tried to do was actually purchase Shop Savvy. And this was several years ago, because the business plan that I had was that we wanted to start with a mobile application that had a bunch of sort of mobile data that we would then be able to advertise. And that was a perfect application, because what you would do is, you would go into a store, scan the barcode, and it would tell you where it was cheaper around you or on the internet. So what happened with that one is I started working with the former CFO of 99-cent only stores. We sort of hit it off and started talking about how we could put this together. So we had capital committed and the whole plan was set, and we had sort of conversations with the current CEO and working to try to put this together. What happened in that case was Alex Muse's early investor was Eduardo Saverin, the co-founder of Facebook that was kicked out, and Alex had given blocking rights to him as a lead investor, so he could basically stop anything the board wanted to do. So that's what happened there. We were blocked from trying to buy that company, and so I think the lesson learned from that was, don't give blocking rights to investors, right? If you want to sell your company. So the idea for ConnectX, this private network to store cryptocurrency wallets, or what we call the device LockBox, was in 2010, sort of before I started doing all of this stuff. So this vision of what I wanted to do has been in the works for quite some time, and it started with a conversation on a road trip of what we thought computers would be in the future and just how everything would work. So I started looking at space and the innovations that were happening, where satellites were getting smaller and less expensive, and more access was available to people who wanted to launch these smaller satellites. And so there was a bunch of things that sort of came together with this. I originally started it as, it could be this secure computer that you always have this access device to link to the cloud. And then when I met my chief inventor and co-founder in ConnectX, you'll see through his technology that it really lended itself to something great with big data. And then it was in an interview with Cryptocurrency News when I was talking about all of this, that the writer of the story said, well, why wouldn't you store cryptocurrency wallets in this network? And then that's when it all started really coming together, and this idea of, how the world is going to be in the future, where a private key is everything. It's not just your wallet, it's your identity, your financial documents, all the things that we talk about. So I met my chief inventor and co-founder through a friend who had a friend over one time, and started talking about what I was doing. And she said, you should talk to this one friend I have. And then from that point, it's like, oh, I went on a blind date with this person. You should talk to him because it sounds like he's working with somebody. And then he introduced me to my chief inventor and co-founder. So it was like a 6 degrees of separation. Almost felt like a destiny type of thing for me to meet him. So he has been working on this for 20 years. So he's has several iterations. He's probably the most talented scientist I've ever worked with. I think he's the equivalent of Nikola Tesla. That's just my opinion. So as we progress, I'm going to bring him on Zoom meetings and things as we start to push through the ecosystem and platform that we're building with BankX. So the precursor technology of some of the things that we're going to talk about in the technology discussion was actually a way to encode geometric shapes in the GSM network, or the cell phone network, where it was hidden in the communication channel, sort of this ghost network. It was proven, commercialized in Australia, New Zealand, and Malaysia, I believe, are the 3 main countries. And the application for this was that it was used to send transaction data from the ATM machines of banking institutions back to the bank. So when you withdrew or deposited money in an ATM, this network was used very securely over the cell phone network to hide that transaction information. This was never hacked, and it was licensed out there to multiple banking institutions. So with that, I want to talk. I'll walk through and I want to show you some graphical representation and how all of this works, and just give you kind of some of the thought process here. So I'm going to stop my video and share my screen. So we'll call this LockBox. ConnectX LockBox are interchangeable. So let me just swap that. If you're on our webinars, you've seen this. We've done this quite a number of times. So the way that transmission technology works today, if you look at sort of the radio AM or FM, everybody knows that, where you have amplitude modulation or frequency modulation. So as you know, with binary, 8 zeros or ones represent each character. And so what happens in amplitude modulation is the height of the wave will distinguish between a 0 or 1. And then the frequency, or the number of waves, and say a given time period, would distinguish between a 0 and 1. And so that's graphically represented here in this diagram. What our technology does is it encodes a geometric shape onto one wave, and that geometric shape can equal the word a, or the word apple, or the entire sentence, the apple fell from the tree. So this is more of a representation, not a sort of a deep dive of how the technology works, but I want people to get the concept of how unique this is and how different the technology that we're bringing is to the cryptocurrency market. So you can see very quickly that this is a huge leap forward in data density, and why I was interested in this for big data. But when you look at the geometric shape concept, we can create a near infinite amount of geometric shapes, which when you compare that to a 0 or 1, a hacker would look at zeros and ones. Well, if it isn't a 0, then it's a 1. But with our technology, it's very difficult to figure out what we're sending, and then what dictionary or what symbol do we apply to what it equals? Like, well, does this symbol equal an A or a B? So it just makes this much more difficult. And as far as current internet devices. So I talk about that data density issue. So if you know, sort of that frequency or amplitude modulation comparison, if you were sending the sentence, the apple fell from the tree, everyone else is sending, say, over 232 radio waves, where we have one radio wave with that symbol. So that is the difference. And so to talk about how we arrived at, you know, not only would this be in a private ground network owned by ConnectX, but then we would start to deploy this technology in satellites. And the reason why is that is the most cost-effective way to really deploy a worldwide network, sort of this overlay network for the cryptocurrency community. So when you look at the market and what's happening, there's a company called OtherNet that has this device called a lantern, and they have satellites sending to remote areas, web pages, videos, books, and you basically link your phone to it and you're able to download. So until, you know, Starlink is fully deployed, you know, this I thought was an interesting take on how you could use satellites for delivery. But what I think is also interesting, a lot of people don't know, is one of the largest and most profitable banks in Indonesia called Bank Rakyat, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. So they deployed the BRI-SAT or BRI-SAT, which was the first ever bank-owned satellite for digital banking. And what they use this satellite to do is for all secure communications within their banking system. So, you know, the idea that satellites and financial applications don't coexist is, you know, it's already been done before in Indonesia with the BRI-SAT satellite system. And then I think a lot of people have heard of Blockstream, who are sending the blockchain to remote areas where, you know, further pushing that to areas that may not have internet access, where they can have a copy of the ledger. And what I think is interesting about all this, and I'll show you some of the different advancements in satellite, is because these satellites are getting much smaller, their capabilities are just getting so far advanced than what they used to be, and their costs are dramatically dropping. So this is called a CubeSat, a 10-centimeter cube, and college students are launching these for $300,000 or $400,000. And they'll do a number of different missions, and the advancements and things that are happening. So our spacecraft manufacturing partner, they have developed the operating system where these spacecraft can do a number of things. It can track another satellite and then link up to it. They are just doing a ton of different things in their satellites. So that company is Tyvak, Tyvak. And if you watch sort of SpaceX launches, sometimes you'll hear their name as like the end of the mission. After the big rocket has sort of deployed the larger satellites, you'll hear the little ones say, oh, here's Tyvak satellites. And so it's pretty interesting to see that they regularly launch these. And so this racks of satellites are known as doves for Planet Labs. And these are what's called a 3U. So these are 3 CubeSat satellites together one. And what Planet Labs is doing, they were sort of the first innovator, and they've been around for a bit here. And they image the entire Earth every day using these satellites, getting high definition imagery, so that you'd be able to see the difference in what is happening and changes on the Earth's surface. So these, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the payload is $3,000 or $4,000 in there, and I'm not sure what the launch costs are, but you know, they're dramatically less expensive than some of the larger satellites. So one company I met with and talked to in Europe, you can test your payload. So in high altitude balloons before you even get into launching. So say at 100,000 feet, you'll be able to test any new technology without having to launch a satellite. So this is our long-term sustainable competitive advantage, where you have the ability within our ecosystem and our wallet and our network to eliminate the use of the internet with new storage and transmission technology. And I think with the use of these geometric shapes, really becomes its own coding system, where, as we talked about, we can create a near infinite amount of geometric symbols. So this idea that you could create a symbol language for a company, a department within that company, potentially a language transmission language for a person, or if there's a large cryptocurrency transaction, we could create a symbol language for that specific transaction, move that money, and then never use that sort of same makeup again in another transaction. So highly secure and not yet seen in the market. So that I wanted to give a sense of how all of this works with the system and where we're headed, and to sort of fill in the gaps. I've had a lot of questions of like, I really want to know about the technology. So I wanted to give people a little bit as we start to progress with BankX and all the ecosystem of dApps and the network and LockBox wallet device that we'll deploy. So in this process to getting to this, I built a hardware prototype that was sort of that idea of you have this keychain and you would have this sort of virtual computer in the beginning. And I did a Kickstarter for that. That was a very good experience, but we ended up not getting to our funding goal with that. That is when I involved it to the big data solution. So you're going to see articles sort of in Fortune and Bloomberg. Some of them talk about this big data solution. And that was all because you could see through the data density advancements in what we're doing. Along this process too, I wanted to know what other people were doing. So I was invited, I was routinely talking to NASA, and I was invited to be on an industry panel for the Delayed Tolerant Network, which was basically a network that they wanted to push to outer space that if something blocked the transmission, how could that network handle the delays or tolerate the delays? That panel and that project ended because the person that ran it ended up passing away. But before they sort of ended that program, they had controlled an arm on a satellite with an Android phone. And so 6 or 7 years ago, that was pretty interesting. So that whole delay tolerant network was an initiative by Vint Cerf, who was the original inventor of the internet. So that was pretty cool for me to be able to sit with him and talk with him about, inventing the internet, right? So that's a rare thing to run into. The other thing before I met my technical co-founder was I started working with a few sort of mathematicians and scientists at UCLA, and one of those was Solomon Golomb, who was the original co-inventor of CDMA technology. And so in talking with him, he's like, I have this idea where we can encrypt zeros and ones in geometric shapes. I was like, man, that's incredible. So we started working on that together, and we filed a patent on that. And that was more of a learning exercise, and we got that working. And that, I think, was a sort of one of the many things that got us to this point. Around that time, I met the communication scientist who was the person who architected and deployed the first ever satellite mesh network for the US Army. So I worked with him in architecting exactly how the ConnectX and LockBox satellite system would work, as far as like how the satellites operate, how they communicate with each other, how we have sort of this multi-level deployment of satellites. So you sort of have this production constellation, and then right above that would be the backup, not only in data, but nodes that would fly in and replace the production constellation system. And then we have some other techniques that we're going to put in where you could have a master backup, say in a Lagrangian point. So a Lagrangian point is an area in space where two celestial bodies have equal gravitational pull, and your satellite sits right there. So there's several of those close to Earth, and so that's another sort of thing in the architecture that we came up with. So in 2018, after all of this that we've done to build, we raised $1.8 million and progressed further with the technology. And so I think we're at a point where we could deploy an alpha version. If we were to raise, say, 10 million, I think within 12 months, we would have an alpha version showing the technology storing the cryptocurrency wallets and securely passing those between our secure servers and the device. So that's, I think, where we are. And so while we were proving those things out, I was looking for, okay, we have this network. What application can we use to do all this? And that's about the time, I was talking with a bunch of investors, and one of them actually ended up being a physical commodity trader. So I started talking with him about all the problems that he has of fraud and trust, and all of the issues in the banking system of having to pay for letters of credit. And I said, this would be great on the blockchain. So that's when we built Exportly, and sort of with his guidance on the UI and how that would all work. What we found with that, it was very difficult to get commodity traders into that system because they're not very technologically savvy. So I think that that is certainly a use case we could use, but I think they need to be sort of brought further along. And even in this exercise with sort of talking with this commodity trader was, he got more and more into cryptocurrency. And the idea with BankX was that, okay, if we have this commodity trading application, how do traders get their trades financed? So that's where BankX came in. So I actually purchased BankX, the website or the domain, in 2017, because that was going to be a mechanism where we had Exportly using the Paxos USD stablecoin, and BankX was corporate treasury and high net worth individuals would come in and back these trades. And so about this time, the cryptocurrency market crashed, and I was looking for investors. And when I had this group of commodity traders, I sort of pitched them on this whole concept, and they loved it. And we got a whole group of them together, and they were basically pulling their assets together to start a fund that they were going to invest in and be on the board, and we're going to do all these things. And about as that was going to happen, the whole pandemic shutdown happened, and it just killed everything I was working on. So at that point, I was like, I just didn't want to wait to do any more of what we wanted to build. And I thought, God, I can make a much better stablecoin than Paxos. And then that's how all this started, where in sort of early 2021, I was looking at all the stable coins that were out there. And I just didn't think, I thought there were some really good ones. Obviously, we mimicked some like Terra Luna and Frax, but I wanted to make one not only that's fully decentralized, but does all the things that we have with BankX. And so it came through sort of, building and starting things, and then sort of something like making us make a right or left turn. And so that's how BankX came to be. So I hope that helps to fill in the gaps and give you a little more of my background, and help you to get to know me and the project a little better. So certainly you go to our YouTube and watch the explainer video, learn more. Has a section where you can get a little more sense of the BankX system. There's a fundamentals area. So we, welcome anybody new to the community, but I just wanted to give this video to people who are interested in, say, learning a little more about how we got here and a little more about me. So I thank you very much.